The stars had watched humanity for 300 years, and humanity had watched them back. Admiral Kung Do-yan stood alone in the observation deck of Station Zero, a military base hidden deep in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. He was 63 years old, and he had spent 40 of those years staring at alien ships that passed through their solar system like humans did not exist. Because to the galaxy, humans did not exist. Not really. He watched a Velen trading convoy drift past Saturn's rings. The massive ships moved slowly, their hulls painted with symbols of the Galaxy Council. They did not stop. They did not send greetings. They did not even slow down to look at the small blue planet where 9 billion people lived and dreamed and loved and died. Earth was nothing to them. A zoo. A rock full of dangerous animals that had not learned to behave. The door behind him opened, and Commander Yoon Hannah walked in. She was in her mid-40s, with sharp eyes and a face that rarely smiled. She carried a tablet with the day's intelligence reports. "Another convoy," she said, standing beside him. 47 ships. Cargo unknown. Destination unknown. "They never tell us anything," Kong said quietly. "They don't think we need to know." Kong remembered the day humanity first learned about the Galaxy Council. It was 2041, and he had been a young officer, fresh out of the academy. A Velen scout ship had appeared in Earth's orbit without warning. It had scanned the planet for 3 days, then left without a single word. 2 weeks later, a message arrived. It was addressed to the governing bodies of the primitive world designated Sal 3. The message was simple. Humanity was being placed under observation. They were not allowed to leave their solar system. They were not allowed to develop weapons above a certain level. They were to stay quiet and stay small until the Council decided they were ready to join galactic society. That decision, message made clear, would take at least 10,000 years. The world had panicked. Governments fought. Religions collapsed and reformed. Billions of people looked up at the sky and realized that everything they believed about their place in the universe was wrong. But then something strange happened. Humanity did not break. It bent, but it did not break. Within 10 years, every nation on Earth had agreed to a single, secret policy. They would obey the Council's rules in public. They would stay quiet. They would act like the primitive animals the galaxy expected them to be, and in private, they would prepare. "The newest ships are ready," Hannah said, breaking the silence. "The 7th Fleet completed its trials last month. That gives us over 4,000 vessels now." Kong nodded slowly. 4,000 ships that the galaxy did not know about. Ships built in hidden shipyards on moons the Council had never bothered to scan. Ships crewed by soldiers who had trained their entire lives for a war that might never come. And the colonies? He asked. 17 worlds now. Population just over 2 billion? All hidden beyond the quarantine zone. The quarantine zone. That was what the Council called the invisible wall they had built around humanity. No human was allowed to travel more than 1 light year from Earth. No human was allowed to contact other species. No human was allowed to exist in any way that mattered. The Council did not know that humans had broken through that wall decades ago. They did not know about the colonies. They did not know about the fleet. They did not know that while they watched humanity with bored eyes, humanity was watching them back with hungry ones. Kong turned away from the window. "Walk with me," he said. They moved through the station's corridors. Station Zero was officially a mining facility. Unofficially, it was the heart of humanity's secret military. 3,000 personnel worked here, monitoring every alien transmission they could intercept, studying every piece of technology they could steal. "I received a message from Earth Command this morning," Kong said as they walked. "The Council is holding a vote next month. They want to extend our quarantine for another 500 years. Hannah's jaw tightened. 500 years. They say we're still too aggressive, too divided, too dangerous. We haven't started a major war in over a century. They don't care." Kong stopped at a window overlooking the station's main hangar. Below them, dozens of sleek black warships sat in neat rows, their engines cold and waiting. To them, we're children playing with fire. It doesn't matter what we do. It only matters what we are. Hannah stared at the ships below. Each one was a miracle of engineering. Human engineers had studied captured alien technology for generations. They had improved it, changed it, made it their own. The ships in this hangar could match anything the Council had. Sometimes I wonder if we'll ever use them, she said. We will. She looked at him. You sound certain. Kong's eyes were tired but steady. The Council has ruled the galaxy for 8,000 years. They're old, comfortable. They've forgotten what it means to be hungry. He placed his hand on the cold glass. Humanity has never forgotten. We've been hungry since we climbed down from the trees. We've been fighting for survival since the first human picked up a rock and decided to use it as a weapon. He turned to face her fully. I think they're watching us. But they're not paying attention. They see a primitive species locked in a cage, and they assume the cage will hold forever. His voice dropped lower. They don't understand that we've been picking the lock since the day they put us in it. The station's lights flickered as a power test ran through the systems. Somewhere in the distance, an engine hummed to life and then fell silent again. The Council will make a mistake someday, Kong continued. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe in 100 years. But they will make one. They'll push too hard, take too much, assume we won't fight back. And when that day comes, he looked back at the sleeping warships. When that day comes, we'll be ready. And the galaxy will learn what happens when you ignore a species for 300 years. When you treat them like animals. When you forget that the quiet ones are often the most dangerous. Hannah nodded slowly. She had heard speeches like this before from other commanders, other leaders. But there was something different about the way Kong spoke. He didn't sound angry. He didn't sound eager for revenge. He sounded patient. And patience, she had learned, was the most dangerous weapon of all. Above them, the Velen convoy disappeared into the darkness between stars. They did not look back. They did not wonder what the humans were doing. They did not care. That was their first mistake. It would not be their last. The galaxy. Council met once every solar cycle in a great hall that floated at the center of the Velen homeworld's largest moon. The hall was ancient. Its walls had seen the rise and fall of 1,000 species. Its floors had been walked by beings who had mastered the stars. When humanity's ancestors still lived in caves, High Speaker Erred stood at the center of the chamber. He was tall, even for a Velen, with pale blue skin and eyes that glowed softly in the dim light. He had ruled the Council for 300 years, and in that time, he had grown used to getting what he wanted. Today, he wanted Europa. The moon is worthless to them, he said, his voice filling the chamber. The humans have done nothing with it. They sit on their little planet and stare at their little screens while a fortune in helix crystals waits beneath Europa's ice. The 11 other council members listened in silence. They represented the 12 elder species of the galaxy, beings who had traveled between stars for thousands of years. They had seen countless primitive species come and go. Humanity was just another name on a very long list. The quarantine zone includes Europa, the Mori delegate said carefully. By our own laws, it belongs to the humans. Laws can be changed, Erred replied, and the humans will never know. They don't have ships capable of reaching Europa. They don't have sensors capable of detecting our mining operations. We take the crystals, we leave, and they continue living in their ignorance. What if they find out? Erred laughed. It was not a kind sound. Then what? They shake their fists at the sky. They write angry messages that we ignore? He spread his arms wide. They are primitives. They cannot hurt us. They cannot stop us. They are nothing. Only one voice spoke against him. Voss was old, even by Keth's standards. His species lived for thousands of years, and Voss had spent most of his watching other civilizations. He had studied humans longer than any other being in the galaxy. He had read their history, their literature, their poetry, and their war records. He stood slowly, his ancient body creaking with the effort. I have watched the humans for a very long time, Voss said, and I have learned one thing above all else. They are not like us. Of course they're not like us, Erred said dismissively. They are primitive. No. Voss's voice was quiet but firm. They are different. When other species face defeat, they surrender. They adapt. They accept the new reality and move forward. He paused. Humans do not do this. The chamber grew still. Humans remember, Voss continued. They pass their anger down through generations. They write stories about revenge that last for thousands of years. They celebrate warriors who died rather than surrender. They have a word grudge that has no translation in most galactic languages because most species do not hold on to hatred the way humans do. He looked directly at Orin. If you take Europa without permission, they will not forget. They will not forgive. And someday, in a year or a century or a millennium, they will make you pay for it. Orin stared at him for a long moment, then he smiled. The Keth have always been too careful, he said. You see danger in shadows? The humans are animals in a cage. They will remain in that cage until we decide otherwise. He turned to the council. I call for a vote. The vote passed 11-1. Only Voss voted against. 3 weeks later, Velen mining fleet entered the Sol system. The humans on Europa saw them coming long before they arrived. The colony beneath the ice was home to 12,000 people, families who had lived there for 3 generations in secret. They had been told that this day might come. They had been trained for it. Colony Director Beak Yori watched the alien ships approach on her command screen. She was 50 years old, a former military officer who had volunteered for the most isolated posting humanity had. She had known the risks when she accepted. How long? She asked her communications officer. 6 hours until they reach orbit. Yuri nodded. She pressed a button on her console and spoke into the microphone. Attention, all colonists. This is Director Beak. We have incoming alien vessels. This is not a drill. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But I need you to remember what we trained for. Get to the deep shelters. Stay calm. Stay quiet. And remember that whatever happens here, Earth will know. Earth will remember. She cut the transmission and turned to her senior staff. Send the emergency broadcast to Station 0. Everything. Every camera. Every sensor. I want Admiral Kong to see exactly what happens here. Director, her security chief said quietly. Do we fight? Yuri looked at the 1,200 soldiers under her command. They were good people. Brave people. They had families in the shelters below. I know, she said. We can't win. And if we fight, they might kill everyone. If we don't, she swallowed hard. If we don't, maybe they'll just take what they want and leave. She was wrong. The Velen did not want witnesses. They did not want stories about what they had done spreading across the human population. They wanted silence. They got it by making sure no one was left to speak. The attack was fast and efficient. The Velen had done this before, 2 other species on other worlds. They knew how to clear a colony. They knew how to make it look like an accident. 12,000. Humans died in 3 hours. Men, women, children, families, who had never harmed anyone. People whose only crime was living on a moon that sat above something the galaxy wanted. Director Beak Yuri died last. She stood in her command center until the end, making sure the transmission never stopped. Making sure Earth saw everything. Her last words were quiet, spoken to no one and everyone. Don't forget us. Please don't forget us. 2 days later, Admiral Kung Do-yeon stood in the war room of Station 0 and watched the recording. The room was full of senior officers. No one spoke. No one moved. The video showed everything. The ships arriving. The colonists running. The weapons firing. The bodies falling. When it ended, the silence was absolute. Commander Yoon Hana stood beside Kang. Her hands were shaking. Tears ran down her face, but her expression was stone. Sir, she said, her voice barely a whisper, what are your orders? Kong did not answer immediately. He stared at the frozen image on the screen, Director Beak's face in her final moments. Bloodied, but unbroken. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. To calm, send the wake-up signal to all fleets, all colonies, all hidden assets. He turned to face his officers. Recall every agent, Activate every sleeper cell. As of this moment, humanity is at war. Sir, one of the younger officers asked, do we inform the civilian government? They've already been told. The decision was made decades ago. If the Council ever attacked human territory, if they ever drew first blood, paused. The response was always going to be the same. He walked to the center of the room and looked around at the men and women who had dedicated their lives to this moment. They thought we were animals, he said. They thought we would stay in our cage forever. They thought our silence meant we were weak. His eyes were cold and hard. They were wrong. Our silence was patience. And now that patience is over, he raised his hand. Let the galaxy learn what happens when you make humanity angry. Let them see what we've been building in the dark. Let them understand, finally, that they should have left us alone. His hand fell. Begin. The first warning came at midnight on a Velen border world called Thresh. A young officer named Kel was monitoring the long-range sensors when 17 of their outer stations went dark at the exact same moment. No distress signals. No final messages. Just silence. Kel stared at his screen, certain he had made a mistake. He ran the diagnostics 3 times. The result was always the same. He called his superior. His superior called the sector commander. The sector commander called the Velen High Command. By the time the message reached High Speaker Oren, the number of dead stations had risen to 34. What do you mean they're gone? Oren demanded. It's just that. High Speaker. Gone. No wreckage. No energy signatures. It's as if they never existed. Oren dismissed it as a technical failure. These things happened in space. Equipment broke down. Stations lost power. There was no reason to panic. Then the Velen Third Armada disappeared. The Third Armada was the pride of the Council fleet. 800 warships, commanded by Admiral Tev, the most decorated military officer in Velen history. They had been sent to investigate the missing stations. They found something? No. One knew what. The only transmission that escaped was a single sentence from Admiral Tev himself. They're everywhere. How are they everywhere? Then nothing. Captain Park Sunwoo watched the last Velen ship burn from the bridge of the human warship Hammer. He was 38 years old, born on one of the hidden colonies, trained since childhood for this moment. His crew called him Ghost because he had a habit of appearing where no one expected. Status report, he said calmly. All enemy vessels destroyed, Captain. No survivors. Sunwoo nodded. He felt no joy, no satisfaction. Only a cold, hard purpose that had been forged into him since he was old enough to understand what the galaxy had done to his people. Send the recording to Earth Command. Then move to the next target. His fleet 200 ships that had never appeared on any galactic registry turned as one and vanished into the darkness between stars. They called themselves the Forgotten. They were the children of the hidden colonies, raised in secret, trained in war, waiting for the day when humanity would finally stop hiding. Every one of them had memorized the names of the 12,000 colonists who died on Europa. Every one of them knew why they were fighting. And every one of them was very, very good at their job. Back on Earth, in a bunker beneath a mountain that officially did not exist. Dr. Choi Mingi watched the battle data stream across her screens. She was 60 years old, the lead architect of humanity's weapons program. She had spent her entire adult life designing ways to kill things that humanity was never supposed to fight. They didn't even scratch us, she murmured, studying the numbers. 800 ships against 200, and they didn't even scratch us. Her assistant, a young man named Quan Tai Wu, leaned over her shoulder. Is that good? It's better than good. It's terrifying. She pointed at the screen. Look at their tactics. The Velen fought exactly the way their manuals said they should. Perfect formations. Standard attack patterns. Textbook responses to every situation. And our people. Minji smiled grimly. Our people don't have textbooks. We taught them to think. To do whatever it takes to win, no matter how ugly it gets. She pulled up a recording of the battle. On screen, a human frigate took a direct hit that should have destroyed it. Instead of exploding, It continued forward, engines burning, and rammed directly into the Velen command ship. Both vessels vanished in a ball of fire. "The Velen have never seen anything like this," Minji said. "They've fought other species for thousands of years. Those species all fought the same way. Clean, organized, civilized. Humans don't fight clean. We fight to win. And we're willing to die to do it." Taewoo was quiet for a moment. "Will that be enough? I don't know. But it's more than they expected. And in war, surprise is everything." Across the galaxy, the surprise was spreading. The Velen were not prepared for human railguns. These weapons fired simple tungsten rods at nearly the speed of light. They had no energy signature. They couldn't be detected until they hit. And when they hit, they went through Velen shields like paper. The Velen were not prepared for human AI. Their computers were smart. But human computers were creative. They learned, they adapted. They found weaknesses in enemy formations and exploited them faster than any biological mind could. Respond? The Velen were not prepared for human pilots. Other species flew their ships carefully, conserving resources, avoiding risk. Human pilots flew like they had nothing to lose, because many of them didn't, and the Velen were definitely not prepared for human psychology. Commander Yoon Hana led the Intelligence Division's Psychological Warfare Unit. Her team didn't fire weapons. They fired ideas. They hacked into Velen communication systems and broadcast the Europa recordings. They sent messages to civilian populations explaining exactly what their government had done. They found every corrupt official, every hidden scandal, every buried secret, and they brought them all into the light. They're not just fighting a military. Hannah explained to Admiral Kong during a strategy meeting. They're fighting an empire that has ruled the galaxy for 8,000 years. An empire built on the belief that they are better than everyone else, superior, untouchable. And now their ships are dying by the hundreds. Their stations are falling silent. And they're getting messages from a species they were told was primitive and harmless. She smiled coldly. They're not just losing a war, Admiral. They're losing their identity. High Speaker Oren stood before the Galaxy Council. For the first time in his 300 years of leadership, he looked afraid. "We have lost 42% of our military assets," he reported. "The human fleets have attacked 117 targets across Council space. We have not won a single engagement. How is this possible?" The Mori delegate demanded. "They are primitives." "They are not primitives." The voice came from the back of the chamber. Voss, the old Keth ambassador, walked slowly to the center of the room. "I told you this would happen. I told you not to provoke them." "You knew?" Oren asked, his voice rising. "You knew they had a hidden fleet?" "No, but I knew what they were capable of. I read their history. I studied their wars." He turned to face the full council. "Do you know what humans do when you hurt them? They don't forget. They don't move on. They build. They plan. They wait. And then, when you least expect it, they strike." "Then what do we do?" Voss was silent for a long moment. "You cannot defeat them in battle," he said finally. "You can only hope that when this is over, they are willing to show you more mercy than you showed their people on Europa." He looked directly at Oren, though I would not count on it. In the darkness between stars, human fleets continued their advance. They moved like ghosts, striking without warning, disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. They were everywhere and nowhere, a nightmare that the galaxy could not wake up from, and leading them all. Admiral Kang Do-yan sat in his command chair and watched the war unfold. "How are the casualty numbers?" he asked Hannah, light much lighter than projected. "We're losing 1 ship for every 50 we destroy." Kang nodded slowly. The numbers were good. Better than good, but numbers were just numbers. Every one represented a human life, a human family, a human story that would never be finished. "Send a message to all fleet commanders," he said. "Tell them to remember why we're fighting. Not for revenge, not for glory. We're fighting so that no human will ever be treated like an animal again. So that no colony will ever be destroyed by people who think we're nothing." He paused. and tell them to make it quick. The longer this war lasts, the more people die. On both sides. Outside his window, the stars burned cold and indifferent. But they were no longer humanity's prison. They were humanity's battlefield, and humanity was winning. 6. Months after the war began, the Velen homeworld fell. It did not fall the way the Council expected. There was no great battle in orbit, no massive invasion fleet blocking out the sun. The humans simply appeared one morning, thousands of ships materializing out of nothing. Their weapons already aimed at every military target on the planet. General Bikwunji commanded the ground forces. She was 55 years old, a small woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. She had spent her entire career preparing for the day when humanity would stop hiding. Now that day had come, and she intended to make sure it meant something. "All units, this is General Beak," she said into her communicator. "Our targets are military only. Soldiers, weapons, ships, infrastructure. Civilians are not to be harmed. Anyone who violates this order will face court-martial. Is that understood?" The confirmations came back immediately. 20,000 human soldiers raised on stories of what the Velen had done to Europa, all agreeing to show mercy to the people who had shown none. Her second-in-command, Colonel No Ji-hoon, stood beside her on the bridge of their command ship. "The soldiers won't like it," he said quietly. "After what the Velen did to our people, many of them want revenge. Revenge would make us no better than them." Right? Beak's voice was hard. "We're not here to destroy the Velen. We're here to send a message. We could burn their world to ash. We have the power. But we choose not to. Why? Because that's what makes us different. That's what makes us human." The invasion of the Velen homeworld took for days. Human soldiers moved through the cities like ghosts, disabling defenses, capturing military leaders, destroying every weapon they could find. The civilian population watched in terror, waiting for the massacres that never came. On the third day, a Velen child wandered into a human patrol. She was small and blue-skinned, with wide eyes full of fear. The soldiers stopped. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Sergeant Moon, Hajina, young woman who had lost 2 brothers in the war, knelt down and offered the child a piece of candy from her ration pack. The child stared at her. Then slowly, she took the candy and ran. That image spread across the galaxy faster than any battle report. Human soldiers, the monsters from the quarantined world, offering kindness to the children of their enemies. It confused people. It frightened them in ways that pure destruction never could. "I don't understand," the Mori delegate said during an emergency council session. "They could destroy us." "Why don't they?" Voss, the old Keth ambassador, answered from his seat in the corner. "Because they want something more valuable than destruction. They want you to know that they could have destroyed you, and they chose not to. They want you to owe them. They want you to remember their mercy for the next 10,000 years. That's..." The Mori delegate struggled for words. "That's terrifying." "Yes," Voss agreed. "It is." Admiral Kong Doyon arrived on the Velen homeworld on the 5th day. He walked through the empty halls of the Great Senate, the same building where High Speaker Oren had once laughed at the idea of humanity being a threat. Commander Yoon Hannah walked beside him, her boots echoing on the ancient stone floor. "We've captured most of the council members," she reported. "Oren is refusing to surrender. He's locked himself in his private chambers with a personal guard of about 200 soldiers. Leave him for now. He's not going anywhere." They stopped in the center of the Senate chamber. The seats rose around them in perfect circles, each one marked with the symbol of a different council species. For 8,000 years, this room had been the heart of galactic civilization. Now it was just an empty building full of dust and silence. "They want to negotiate," Hannah said. "I know. They're offering a ceasefire. Full withdrawal from human space. Recognition of our sovereignty. Reparations for Europa." Kong was quiet for a long moment. He walked to the center of the room, where a small pedestal held a holographic display of the galaxy. He touched it, and the image flickered to life, showing the current state of the war. Human fleets were marked in blue. Council territory was marked in gold. There was a lot more blue than there used to be. Do you know what they called us? He said finally. Before the war, they called us Category 7 primitives. Too aggressive to be trusted. Too dangerous to be free? They looked at our history and saw only violence and division. They never saw our art, our music, our capacity for love and sacrifice and hope. He turned off the display. They didn't attack Europa because they needed the crystals. They attacked because they didn't believe we mattered. Because they thought we were animals, and animals don't have rights. So we don't accept the ceasefire. No, his voice was cold but steady. Not yet. They haven't learned the lesson yet. They're offering peace because they're afraid. That's not enough. They need to understand, deep in their bones, that what they did was wrong. Not because it failed, but because it was cruel. He started walking toward the exit. We continue the advance. We take their military. We dismantle their power. And when they have nothing left, when they truly understand what their arrogance cost them, then we talk about peace. Hannah followed him. And if they don't learn? Kang stopped at the door. He looked back at the empty Senate, at the chairs where beings who had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years had once sat and decided that humanity was nothing. But then, we make sure they can never hurt anyone again. The war continued. Human. Fleets swept through council space like a storm. They destroyed shipyards. They captured mining stations. They disabled defense networks that had protected the galaxy for millennia. Every target was military. Every civilian was spared. Every act of mercy was recorded and broadcast to every corner of known space. The Council tried to fight back. They sent fleet after fleet against the human advance. None of them returned. They tried assassination. Human intelligence found every agent before they got close. They tried to turn the other species against humanity. But the other species had seen the Europa recordings. They had heard the stories of human mercy. Many of them had been oppressed by the Council themselves for generations. They chose to stay neutral. Some of them secretly chose to HFY on the Council's core worlds. Panic spread. Governments collapsed. Leaders fled. The structures that had kept galactic civilization stable for 8,000 years began to crack and crumble, and through it all, humanity kept coming. Captain Park Sun-Wee's fleet had become legend. The Forgotten appeared without warning, struck without mercy, and vanished without a trace. They had destroyed more enemy ships than any other unit in human history, and their captain had never lost a single vessel. A young officer asked him one night after another, perfect victory, "How do you always know where they'll be?" Sun-Woo looked out at the stars. "Because I understand them. The Council species have been fighting the same way for thousands of years. They're predictable, comfortable. They've never faced an enemy who didn't follow the rules, and we don't follow the rules. We don't have rules." Sun-Woo turned to face him. "We have one goal. Win. Everything else is flexible. That's what 300 years of preparation gave us. Not just ships and weapons. A way of thinking. A willingness to do whatever it takes." Put his hand on the young officer's shoulder. "The Council thought they were keeping us in a cage. They were wrong. They were forging us in a fire. And now they're going to burn in it." Outside. The stars waited in silence. The war was far from over, but the ending was already written. The war lasted 18 months. When it ended, the Galaxy Council no longer existed. High Speaker Orin surrendered on a cold morning in the ruins of his private palace. He walked out alone, his guards having abandoned him weeks ago. His blue skin had faded to gray. His glowing eyes were dim. He looked nothing like the proud leader who had once laughed at the idea of humanity being a threat. Admiral Kung Do-yan was waiting for him. They stood face to face in silence. Two beings from opposite ends of the galaxy. One who had ruled the stars for 300 years. One who had been told his species was nothing. "I would like to know," Orin said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, "how you did it. how you built your fleet without us knowing, how you hid your colonies, how you became so powerful while we watched and saw nothing. Nung studied him for a long moment. You didn't see nothing. You saw exactly what we showed you. A primitive species, divided, aggressive, stuck on a single world going nowhere. It was a lie. It was the truth, just not the whole truth. Kong's voice held no anger, no satisfaction, only exhaustion. We were all those things. We still are. But we're also more. We adapt. We survive. We learn from our mistakes and keep moving forward, no matter how many times we fall. He took a step closer. You could have been our friends, Oren. You could have welcomed us as equals, helped us grow, learned from us as we learned from you. His eyes grew hard. Instead, you put us in a cage and forgot about us. And when you finally remembered we existed, you killed 12,000 innocent people because you wanted something that sat beneath their homes. I was wrong, Oren said quietly. I see that now. Good, remember that feeling? Remember it every day for the rest of your life. Kong turned and began walking away. Take him to the transport. He'll be tried for his crimes. All of them will. The trials took months. Every council leader who had voted for the Europa attack was brought before a galactic tribunal. The proceedings were broadcast to every inhabited world. Humanity wanted the galaxy to see, to understand, to remember. Most of the leaders were found guilty. They were not executed. Humanity was very clear about that. They were sentenced to spend the rest of their lives helping rebuild the worlds their decisions had damaged, working alongside the species they had once ruled over, learning what it meant to serve instead of command. Oren was the last to be sentenced. He stood in the tribunal chamber, surrounded by representatives from every species in the galaxy, and heard his fate. He would spend the rest of his natural life on Europa, helping to build a memorial for the 12,000 humans who had died there. He did not protest. He did not beg. He simply nodded and let them take him away. A new alliance formed from the ashes of the old council. They called it the Galactic Union. Every species had a voice. Every species had a vote. And humanity, the primitives who had been locked in a cage for 300 years, sat at the center of it all. Ambassador SEO Yuna delivered humanity's opening address to the First Union Assembly. She was young, only 32, born on one of the hidden colonies. She had grown up knowing that someday humans would take their place among the stars. Now that day had come, and she intended to make it count. The Great Hall was silent as she approached the speaker's platform. Hundreds of alien delegates watched her with a mixture of fear, respect, and curiosity. Most of them had never seen a human in person before the war. Now they couldn't look away. 300 years ago, Yuna began, your ancestors discovered our world. They watched us fight each other. They watched us nearly destroy ourselves with nuclear weapons. They watched us struggle with disease and poverty and hatred. And they decided we were too dangerous to be allowed into the galaxy. She looked around the room slowly. In some ways they were right. We are dangerous. We have a capacity for violence that frightens even us sometimes. We can be cruel. We can be selfish. We can do terrible things to each other and to other species. Her voice softened. But we are also capable of great kindness, great sacrifice, great love. We are a species that will run into burning buildings to save strangers, that will starve ourselves to feed our children, that will cross the galaxy to avenge 12,000 people we never met, not because they were special, but because they were ours. She placed her hands on the podium. The council made a mistake. They looked at our worst moments and assumed that was all we were. They never saw our best moments. Our artists creating beauty that makes people weep. Our scientists unlocking the secrets of the universe. Our ordinary people performing extraordinary acts of courage every single day. Her voice grew stronger. We do not want to rule the galaxy. We have no interest in becoming what the council was. But we will not be ignored. We will not be put in cages. We will not be treated like animals ever again. She picked up a document from the podium. The treaty that would reshape galactic civilization is our offer. A new alliance. Equal membership. Equal rights. Equal responsibilities. No species above another. No quarantine zones. No Category 7 primitives. She looked directly at the Velen delegation, many of whom could not meet her eyes. We can be your partners, your allies, maybe even your friends. But only if you accept us as we are, not as you want us to be. She set the document down. The choice is yours. You can sign this treaty and build something new with us. Or you can refuse and spend the rest of your existence wondering when the species you once caged will decide that mercy is no longer worth giving. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then, one by one, the delegates came forward to sign. Years later, when all the treaties had been signed and the new order had settled into something like stability, Voss returned to his homeworld. He was very old now, ancient, even by Keth standards. He had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. He had watched humanity go from primitives in a cage to the most respected species in the galaxy. He had lived through the greatest mistake in galactic history and the war that followed. A young Keth student found him sitting in his garden, staring up at the stars. "May I ask you something, Elder?" Voss nodded slowly. "What did we learn?" "From the humans. From the war. What lesson should we carry forward?" Voss was quiet for a long time. The stars turned overhead. Somewhere out there, human ships patrolled the trade routes. Human ambassadors negotiated treaties. Human scientists explored worlds that had never been touched before. "Never mistake silence for weakness," he said finally. The humans were silent for 300 years. They watched. They learned. They built. And when we finally gave them a reason to speak, their voice shook the galaxy. He turned to look at the young student.
"I never mistake patience for ignorance."
The humans knew exactly what we thought of them. They knew we called them primitives and animals and nothing. They let us believe it because it served their purpose. They were playing a game we didn't even know existed. His old eyes grew sad. Never ever assume you understand a species simply because they are young. The galaxy is very old. We have seen countless civilizations rise and fall. We thought our age made us wise. But wisdom is not about how long you have lived. It is about what you have learned. He looked back up at the stars. The humans learned more in 300 years of captivity than we learned in 8,000 years of freedom. They learned patience. They learned discipline. They learned how to turn their greatest weakness, their division, their aggression, their endless fighting, into their greatest strength. The student considered this. "Do you regret warning the council about them?" "No. I regret that the council did not listen." Voss smiled sadly. "But perhaps that was always how it had to be. Perhaps humanity needed a war to prove who they were. Perhaps the galaxy needed to be reminded that age does not equal power, and that the quiet ones are often the most dangerous of all." He closed his eyes. "Remember the humans, young one? Remember their patience. Remember their anger. Remember their mercy." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And if you ever look up at the stars and see a world that seems too quiet, too peaceful, too easy to ignore, ... He opened his eyes one last time. "Remember that the same stars once looked down on Earth, and Earth stayed silent until the galaxy made it speak. And when Earth finally spoke, empires fell." The student bowed and left. Voss remained in his garden, watching the stars turn, remembering the humans who had taught him the most important lesson of his very long life: never underestimate the quiet ones. They're always listening.